Hi, I'm Melisa Idris and you're watching The Brand, the show about advertising, how it works and how it works on us. Now joining me on the show today, I have Ashish Bhasin, the CEO of Dentsu Aegis Network for the Greater South region, and he's also the chairman and CEO of Dentsu India, which is just an advertising network that he grew from a 50-member team to a company of 3,500 people. It's a pleasure to have you, Ashish. Welcome to the show.
Delighted to be here.
Right, so I do want to talk about your purview as CEO for the Greater South region, which I understand is a newly created portfolio, right? A newly created region. It doesn't include just India, which is a fascinating market, but also, a diverse range of countries. So Malaysia's in there, Indonesia, Thailand, the Philippines, but you've also got Sri Lanka and Bangladesh and Myanmar and Vietnam. So for me, I'm thinking this collection of countries, while in the same region, is as diverse as can be. So as someone who's looking at this from an advertising point of view, talk to me about what it's like in terms of these different markets, especially in terms of the maturity of the advertising industry. Where do you see each country at, for instance?
Well, you're absolutely right. In this business, there are no two countries that are ever alike. And I think it's a bit of a misnomer trying to club countries together as ASEAN or Southeast Asia or Greater South or whatever, right? These are more done for administrative purposes. So when our company restructured, APAC had 3 divisions to it. One was ANZ, one was Greater North, which was China and the countries in the north, and the other was Greater South, right? So there are similarities, of course, between markets, and the interesting part about the Greater South portfolio is that all markets are in a high growth phase, right? They're large populations, very active, generally economy is doing well, digitizing fast, so there are a lot of common threads. In many ways, the consumers also behave and respond with some similarity. Emotions, for example, are similar, family ties are important, and so on and so forth. Culturally, there are similarities, but however, it would be a mistake to ever think that any 2 countries are alike, because there are significant nuances that differentiate one market to the other. And while the idea can be the same, the interpretation of it can be significantly different in any 2 markets. And anyone who doesn't remember that is in deep trouble.
Well, talk to me about the nuances of the Indian market, because that's also something that you had. What have you learned in all your years heading this company? What are the nuances particular to the Indian market that you found?
Well, I've overseen the Indian market in some capacity or the other for the last 32 years, and I can tell you there is no market called the Indian market, because people don't understand the north of India, for example, is very different from the south of India. They might as well have been 2 different countries in terms of behavior or response, but at the same time, there are some things that bind us together. Cricket is one of them. Bollywood is the other. I always say there are actually only 2 religions in India, cricket and Bollywood, and passions run high on both of them, right? So it's a high growth market. It's also a very difficult market, because there's some parts of India which are more advanced than the most advanced countries in the world, and there are large parts where there is still development yet to happen, there is poverty and so on. But a large amount of consuming class is coming up. So people who are below the poverty line are now coming into the consuming class. The middle class is growing. So there's general potential for all-round growth. A very discerning consumer, but a very value-conscious market. It is, and it's a very difficult market to do business in, because there's often no one common language that binds. So you might have to create communication. There are 16 official languages in India. It's quite common to have to create advertising in at least 7 or 8 languages for it to be understood. And culturally, each of those languages has its own nuances. Those regions have their own nuances. So it's a very difficult market to operate in.
So how do you, as head of DAN in that market, then navigate those difficulties and those differences? I also understand that you have I think led the acquisition of 14 companies in India in the past 4 or 5 years, which is as I understand, unheard of in the market, right? Is that part of the strategy to understand or to kind of bring together all the differences in the market under one roof?
Look, acquisitions is an integral part of our strategy, and in India, I think we used it exquisitely to our advantage. my thinking when I started off in India was that half my growth should come inorganically, which is through acquisitions, and half should come organically. And acquisitions help you in more ways than one. Of course, it gives you capabilities, etc., but it brings in fresh talent into the company, and we've been very lucky onto that. Though, of course, I do believe that acquisitions cannot be done only for money. That's the worst way to do an acquisition. Right. Of course, money is very important. I'm not saying it's not, but the most integral part in doing an acquisition is that there should be a strategic intent. If you're just doing it to shore up your balance sheet, it's bound to fail. There should be cultural compatibility, and it should fulfill some purpose, some part of your strategy. It can't be a substitute for your strategy. It can be an accelerator to your strategy, and it worked brilliantly for us in India, I think.
And you're thinking that what you got right is the digital aspect.
That's one of the things. Okay. That's one of the things. I think the thing that works well for us. Look, I don't like my clients' money going into my competitor's pocket. So what I did was I started following up that where is he spending his money, and what part of that service I don't have, right? If I don't have it, either I have to grow it or I have to go out and buy it. And so I started actually following clients' money to create my business in that sense.
Follow the money.
Yeah, follow the money. That's where it all works well. And digital was an integral part of that. So to give you a perspective, India, at that time when I started, it was only 4% of the market was digital. So my competitors weren't looking at it. Today, almost 19-20%, Dan does a digital report, which is like a landmark report in India. The latest one shows that about 19-20% of the market is digital. But my group, Dan India, gets almost 48% of its revenue, nearly half of its revenue from digital. We're now 3,700 people in India, nearly 1,700 of them are digital specialists. I have 8 specialist digital agencies, right? Wow. So we've done it at scale. We're the largest customers of Google, largest customers of Facebook. So it's an area where others weren't focusing. I knew it was going to be a high growth area in years to come. At that time it was not, and therefore we went ahead and took a leadership in that.
Okay, well, let's come back and talk about the growth in digital advertising after these messages. Stay with us right here on The Brand. Welcome back to The Brand. I'm Melisa Idris. I have the CEO of Dentsu Aegis Network here with me. He is the CEO for the Greater South region, and we're talking about digital, which is something that you're passionate about. Now, you mentioned the Dan ad spend forecast for 2019 a little bit earlier. That recent report that you released showed that digital will be the leading channel in 26 out of 59 markets which were analysed. Malaysia joined the list for the first time, which was very interesting. I want to talk to you about how that has changed your conversation, the way you're doing business with your clients. Are you saying that this is the way forward, digital is where it's going to be, and navigating that narrative to your clients?
I think more than the way we do business, it's actually digital is disrupting every single business. There is no business of any client in any part of this region, forget Malaysia, which isn't getting disrupted by digital, right? If you meet a client and he tells you my business is unaffected by digital, either he's lying or he's unaware, right? And anything, I mean, you're a TV channel, I can bet you your business is getting disrupted.
Of course.
We're an advertising agency, our business has got disrupted. There is no business, however big or small, that hasn't got disrupted and isn't getting disrupted in digital, right? Now, what that means is it actually puts a huge amount of pressure on clients, because they have to keep their businesses going. At the same time, they have to adapt to a very new world, which they perhaps, some of them were not that attuned or ready for taking on.
Yeah.
And I think our job has to be their partners in this whole digital transformation process and hold their hands through it. So I always describe our role as that of a Sherpa. Now, you've got to climb the Mount Everest, but as a client, but you've got to climb it yourself. At best, we can be your Sherpa. We've gone through that a number of times, so we know the route, and we can do the heavy lifting for you, right? But that still doesn't mean you don't have to climb. You still have to do the climb yourself. And that's what I always tell our clients, right? So it's, your digital transformation is not something you can outsource to your agency. You can use them as a Sherpa who partners you through this process because they have the expertise and they can do the heavy lifting for you, but you still have to take your whole organization and go ahead. And I think that proposition resonates very well with clients, because consultants who come in and say, no, hang on, just give it to us, we will do it, we'll digitally transform your company and we'll give it back to you.
Right.
I think clients are realizing that doesn't work, it only works on PowerPoints.
Okay, right? so are they responsive then to this type of messaging?
Very much so, very much so. So we've, we've had strong digital brands, for example, iProspect, which specializes in the search and performance area. Usually in most markets, it's either the number 1 or number 2 player. In India, for example, we're about 2.5 times the size of any of our next competitors in search and performance. And that's very critical for our clients because that's what delivers results, right? We've got Isobar, which is a very, very strong digital brand. You may have heard that a couple of years ago, we acquired Merkle in the US. That's the first large data organization, in fact, the largest and the first that was ever acquired by any advertising agency.
Right.
And I think more and more data is going to be at the heart of whatever part of advertising you do, right? Whichever aspect, whether it's digital, non-digital, creative, media, data. As consumers today, you and I are leaving a digital footprint in whatever you do. You order a Grab, you buy a movie ticket, you buy a book, whatever you do, you're leaving a complete digital footprint. There's a huge amount of data we are all generating, the whole big data thing.
Right.
But I don't think anybody knows how to handle that big data. They all make a lot of noise, everybody, including agencies, including us, make a lot of noise. Big data, it's going to change the world and so on.
Right.
But we don't know what to do with it. And the client doesn't know what to do with it, right? People who are able to handle this best and build that into the way of doing business, I think will be the winners for tomorrow. And the best way to future-proof your business as a client, as an agency, as anybody, is to have a clear data strategy and to invest behind it now.
Okay.
You have to make a beginning somewhere.
So what are you doing at Dan to leverage on the growth of tapping into data?
Well, we have a clear data strategy. We have an overall group data strategy, and then hopefully we will, all our countries will have a great data strategy. I know for India, for example, we've got our own DMP, we've got our own data team, we've developed Dan Data Labs because India has a high IT skill as well, which is creating tools not just for India but for 32 markets, and I hope to roll them out in our whole region. I know here in Malaysia, we're now starting to focus very heavily on digital, bringing in all the data from iProspect, from Isobar, from our media companies, and are evolving a data strategy which will be like a 2 to 3 year plan, because it's not something for today, it's something that you have to future-proof yourself over there. And likewise, in different markets, we're in different states of development. That's what we're chasing. And wherever we need CRM and expertise through M1, we bring in Merkle, because they're the real big data experts.
Right. I find it quite interesting because, with the growth of digital advertising, and you talk about the markets that you're looking at that are high growth phase, right? So they're probably jumping over that middle traditional advertising segment straight into digital advertising, and consumers really being open and savvy using mobile phones and online. So how are these different markets adapting to the growth of digital? In your experience, have you seen these markets adapt to the growth of digital, especially outside of India, say in more of the emerging markets like Vietnam, which I think is fascinating?
Well, different markets are obviously reacting in a different way, but there is one similarity. I find that the youth is very similar whether you're in Vietnam or you're in Thailand or you're in Malaysia, or in fact even in London, New York, wherever you are, right? Because they watch the same media, they have the same rock stars and pop stars and same dresses, same whatever. So they are tending to be a lot more similar, and they have adopted to digital much better than the older generation in most markets, right? I've been in advertising for 33 years. For the first 30 of them, I felt that advertising at agencies and marketeers were leading the consumer. We used to give a direction in a sense. We were thinking ahead. For the last 3 to 5 years, I have a clear feeling the consumer is leading us.
Right.
I think the consumer has moved much further ahead than marketers and advertising agencies have, particularly in the last 5 years, because the youngsters, there's a digitally native generation that has now come up, right? And they're instinctively adopting the digital technology, while what's happening at both marketeers and agencies is that the decision makers have white hair like, or peppered hair like I do, right? Who are not digital natives. So I think it is very important that all clients and all agencies understand that the consumer is ahead of you. Okay. Communication is out of your control now, right? We were used to very carefully crafting a message, right. Spending a lot of time getting the font size right and all of that, and then that would be broadcast in a media that we had bought. That was what advertising was all these years. You control, the advertiser controlled the message, the advertiser controlled the environment. Today, there could be a youngster sitting in a coffee shop who shoots a video and talks about your brand. Before you know it, it's gone viral, not just in your country, but all over the world.
And you have no control over that, right?
And you have no control. And it is no longer a one-way communication of you talking to the consumer. It is a two-way dialogue, or worse, it is a one-way dialogue but the other way around.
You are not able to communicate back.
Absolutely. And you know, people who listen, clients who will listen better, agencies who will listen better, and be more real-time and responsive and agile are the ones who are going to succeed in the future. All the rules that we played with for the last 30 years can now be thrown out of the window.
Wow, okay, that's a big statement. We're going to come back and continue our conversation. Stay with us right here on The Brand. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching The Brand. I'm Melisa Idris. I have with me Ashish Bhasin, the CEO of the Greater South Region for Dentsu Aegis Network. Now, just before the break, you heard him say that you should throw all the rules of advertising for the past 30 years out the window and time to come up with brand new rules for digital advertising. But despite the high growth potential of digital, there's still some challenges when it comes to measurement of digital advertising. We still can't seem to agree on common metrics and a kind of common language for this. What has been your conversations with clients and with people in the industry?
Before I answer that, just so that my previous statement is not fully misunderstood, there is something that will not change. And that is that we are in the business of ideas and storytelling, right? Digital is a great medium that gives us great insights to do it, and we have to now learn to do it differently. But the real reason advertising exists is to have a big idea, to weave it around in a story which the consumer understands and communicate that in the best possible way, right? That is something, whether it is digital, print, TV, that is never going to change. So while you'll throw a lot of rules out or whatever, this is something that's never going to go out.
That is the essence of what
That's the
what
essence of it. And the reason for that is that we are human beings. We have emotions. We laugh, we cry, we like some things, we don't like some things, right? And as long as we remain human beings and don't become robots, which hopefully in my lifetime won't happen, that part of advertising will never change. And therefore, the importance of creative will never go down. You've got to be, you've got to be data driven. You've got to be, you've got to have technology, but you've got to be creatively led. What should I say? The manifestations of that will change with the medium, with digital, etc. But that essence of advertising, I don't think will ever change, at least not in my lifetime.
And I think that is what sustains the industry, right? As long as you go back to the first rule. But let's come back to the challenges.
One thing that's always perplexed me is that this is the most measurable of the mediums.
Really?
Right? Well, it is, because actually I should be able to know what you're doing, where you're doing, how long are you there. So measurability potential is the highest.
Okay.
But as an industry, we've not agreed on a common metric or a common currency. So for example, in print or in television, usually most countries have a readership survey or a circulation survey, or in the case of television, TV ratings, etc. So there's an agreed currency, right or wrong, good or bad, but there's an agreed currency. Now for the most measurable of the mediums, I mean, digital theoretically should be most measurable
because
you can track everything,
right?
It's data-based, right? For some strange reason, we are probably the worst at measuring that. I don't think it's not measured. I just think that the metrics are not agreed. So somebody will come and tell you that if you watch my thing for 3 seconds, it's a view. Somebody will say, no, for 10 seconds, it's a view. So from that to what's the common currency, what's the common metric, in most markets that hasn't been agreed. the way forward is going to be that finally you have to have one view of the consumer. The consumer today is not seeing offline, online, traditional, non-traditional, TV, mobile separately, right? Think of yourself as a consumer. You start from home, you may be watching a program on your mobile, then you might go home and watch it on the television screen, you'll read the newspaper. So you're seeing it multimedia across.
Right.
Therefore, measurement also has to evolve to that. You have to have a single view of the consumer, and you got to have, research or data that shows you all of that. Now, for a very smart industry that we are, we somehow have neither devised that and worse, not agreed about it.
Right.
I think partly because you can't ever get two advertising guys to agree on anything. So we keep talking and debating and trying to get it perfect. But I hope in the next couple of years that problem gets licked, because that's very important from a client's point of view.
Sure.
So that you get a single view of the consumer.
Well, I'm actually wondering whether it is because this part of the industry is so nascent. I mean, it's been around only, digital has been around for what, 15, 20 years maximum. So compared to all the other traditional advertising, that's had time to mature and develop, and we can agree on common metrics or common language, as you said. But is it just a matter of giving time for digital to grow up?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty grown up. I mean, tech companies today, so Facebook and Google account for between 60 to 70, 80% in most markets, right? Mm-hmm. These are companies that are sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars of cash. They are the brightest people on earth working for them.
They should be able to figure out something.
I can't understand why, I mean, we're solving world problems. They're taking huge problems and are finding solutions to that. This should, in my view, be a very tiny problem to solve. Right. So I think in some ways the tech giants also have a responsibility, but equally advertising agencies, media agencies, digital agencies have to get out of, have to understand that this is a very important thing to do and start coming together. Advertising agency associations, media associations, clients, they have to start driving it and demanding it, because...
demanding it, yeah.
Yes, because, at the moment it sounds to me like it's on nobody's agenda. I think you need to bring, everybody understands it's a nice to do thing, but it's not a hot priority for anyone to do, and therefore it's not getting done, right? So I think over the next couple of years, at least I'm going to drive it in this region across industry body. I'm the president of Advertising Agencies Association of India.
This is going to be on your agenda?
It is already. I've already started talking about it. I'm also on the board of BARC, which is the broadcast audience research, the TV rating company. I'm the chairman of Media Research Users Council in India. So in all these three bodies, I've already started raising these issues. Some of my colleagues industry colleagues, competitors have responded very well. Some have not. So that's happening. But that's India. But equally, every market that I go to, I'm going to encourage my colleagues to take it up in their industry bodies so that we collectively start addressing this. It's going to take a couple of years. It's not going to be an easy solution, but we've got to start talking about it.
Yeah, at least get the conversation going.
That's right.
Okay, let's wrap up the show. I want to get your thoughts, Ashish, on where you see the trends are going to be for the rest of the year. Talk to me about how the world of advertising will always continue to look for the next big thing. What is it in your opinion?
I think it's the mobile. One thing that binds this whole region, irrespective of how underdeveloped or developed you are. So Malaysia is relatively a pretty developed market. I think you have a 75% smartphone penetration. There are other markets, like India, for example, has a 30% smartphone penetration. Right. Some, like Cambodia and so on, have different figures. So the whole region has a different level of it. But whether you have high penetration or low penetration, one thing that is almost becoming universal, near universal, is mobile. And it's becoming like a third limb for consumers, because you sleep with it, you wake up with it, etc. I don't think marketeers and advertising agencies have learned to use it to its fullest potential yet as an advertising medium, right? We've done a lot of work on it. We started from the SMS era. We've evolved to a little more, I would say 2 stages more beyond that. But I think there's a lot more to be done. And if I take a 1 to 3 year perspective, I clearly see that a lot of work, a lot of effort will now happen on mobile, because every new consumer who's now coming onto internet, almost 100% of them are coming in only through mobile, particularly in developing markets, right?
They're jumping that straight into mobile.
Yes, nobody, I mean, so for example, if you look at India, which today has about 450 million internet users, the DAN study shows that in next 3 years, about 200 to 300 million more consumers are going to get added, right? Now, where are these guys going to come from? They're not going to come from Bombay, Delhi, using laptops in air-conditioned offices. They're going to come from the mobile, from small towns, from villages, etc., etc. And that is going to change the complexion of advertising. You can no longer use only English. You'll have to use regional language. The first few 100 million users were largely English speakers. The next 300 million are going to be largely non-English speakers who are going to come on, right? Their nuances are different, their demands are different, their aspirations are different. And it's the same story in different shades, whether you look at Vietnam, which is a very interesting market. You look at Thailand, which is a high penetration market, in Bangkok, but slightly different.
The rest of the country,
the rest of it. You look at Philippines, very similar. Manila Metro is very different from, let's say, some of the other provinces, etc. So it's a very similar story that is playing around the Greater South region. But the one common thing is that the omnipresence of mobile is a common trend which I see emerging.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. It's been such a lovely conversation. I've been speaking to Ashish Bhasin, the CEO for Greater South Region for Dentsu Aegis Network. And you've been watching The Brand. I'm Melisa Idris, and I'm going to be back with you same time next week. I'll catch you then. Thank you so much,
Melisa.
for your time.
Thank you. I hope you got some good answers.
I did.